What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. Let's run the show. Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a bestseller and to inspire you to start, finish, and publish your book. I'm Mark DeVoe.
And I am Mark Stay, and today's show is sponsored by wonderful patrons. Our new ones include Jack Logan, Fadzi Kasambira, Sage Gordon Davis, and many, 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 many more. And without you folks, we wouldn't be able to keep this show going. So a huge thank you to all of you, and a happy 4 years to you, Mr. D. How's it going?
Absolutely brilliant. Happy birthday, Mr. Stay, or happy birthday to the podcast, we should say. We started the podcast 4 years ago, and we always joke about this, but little did we know what we were letting ourselves in for.
Well, 4 years old. I mean, we're like potty trained by now. We're looking forward to going to big school. We've learned our ABCs and all of our numbers. So yeah, I think we should celebrate. I think we should set. Now I've brought, here we go. Now this is for the video viewers only, but you know, you can hear it on here. I brought a Colin the Caterpillar, Marks and Spencer's Colin the Caterpillar cake here, which it says on here, he is what he eats. What does that mean? He's made of chocolate? What? And I'm celebrating with American champagne, Coke Zero.
Oh, fantastic. And so, I'm celebrating with the largest mug Canada has ever seen. Yes, this is actually, it's more of a barrel. But this is my mug. So So welcome to everyone. And we have a live studio audience with us today. We've invited to our birthday party all of our patrons and Academy members. And we have a load of people in the house. We want to welcome everyone who's showing up. People are coming in all the time. We want to welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming. And we have decided to do something a bit funny today. Mr. Stay's actually getting the Colin the Caterpillar cake. I've actually taken a screenshot of this article, so we'll be able to put it on the website. If you want to see a picture, if you're new to this podcast or you've got no idea what Colin the Caterpillar cake is, I mean, you've got to see this photo. The glee on Mr. Stay's face right now. He's actually just beheaded Colin, and he's already getting stuck in.
I'm going to bite his face off.
Interesting episode. He's just biting off the head of Colin the Caterpillar. This is the first time we've actually done this live on the show. If anyone doesn't know what this is about, you've got to go either listen back to the first season or read our book Back to Reality, where Colin makes an appearance. But it's a bit of a legendary cake that you can buy from Marks and Spencer's in the UK. And it's kind of been a running theme throughout the show. So anyway, how does it taste, Mr. Stay? Because I was going to nip down to M&S and then realised I was actually in Canada and we don't have them over here. I'd like to ask everyone, if you've got any questions for us today, what we're going to do today is we're doing it a bit different. As it's our birthday, we're going to have a Ask Us Anything. And we've got a lot of questions which have been asked in the house. So we're going to start by, I'm going to start by bringing up the questions that we've had from our folks on the BXP team and in the Academy. And if you've got any questions that you want to ask, just pop them in the question box below. So Mr. Stay, did you want to fire off the first question? Because I think we've got a lot of great questions to get.
Well, we've got one from our friends Julian Barr. Will you keep the podcast going when you're bajillionaires? Over to you, Mr. D. You're bloody right.
You know what's really interesting, though? 4 years ago, when we started the podcast, we were kind of getting on the beginning of the upward trend. And now it's like every single person is talking about either doing or starting a podcast. And I think what's fascinating, there's something that's changed massively in the last couple of months, and that's that Spotify decided to get into podcasting in a big way. And there have been some ridiculous deals, absolutely bonkers deals with the Kardashians, and a number of other people. And I mean, there's one deal that Spotify have done where they have offered somebody $100 million for exclusive rights to their podcast. So, Mr. Stay, where should we start the bidding at? Do we hear £1? £1 for anyone exclusive rights for the Bestseller Experiment podcast? Drop us a note on it.
50p.
Come on, Joe, 50p. All right, 25 pence. Do they still? They don't even have 25p pieces, do they, in England? We do over here in Canada. But it's kind of interesting. I am actually very excited about the podcasting world because I really do think podcasts are starting to mature. But here's the thing. I want to put this question out to every author out there that's thinking of starting a podcast. I think we're going to see a merging of audiobooks and podcasts and all kinds of new formats for delivering your stories. So if you're thinking of starting a podcast, don't do it for the money. That's my advice, because there isn't much. What I would recommend though is do it for if you want to do it for the experience of actually like this, doing it in front of a live audience or just learning how to talk on the fly. And it's a lot of fun. But it also, I remember thinking back, Mark, do you remember the first couple of episodes we did? We were looking a little bit kind of finding our way in just how all this worked, weren't we?
Yeah, it was. It's interesting because I've got my diary. Shall I talk? I've got a diary entry about, because weirdly, I've been keeping a diary for about 15 years now, and weirdly, I don't mention the conversation we had. I found an email from 2014 that you sent me. Regarding Robot Overlords, because I think I put the trailer up, and it was the first contact. You just messaged me on Facebook and said, "This is amazing, living the dream kind of thing. Let's do something." Then nothing for like 2 years, and then I've got Wednesday, 17th of August, 2016. I had a very productive Skype call with Mark D tonight. We could be recording our first podcast next week! ! And then on Saturday, the 20th of August, Friday the 19th, Mark D and I ploughed onwards with the podcast prep. I've designed a little social media lozenge, and we've been testing microphones. His is much, much better than mine. And as you can see, nothing has changed because my mic just died a minute ago. But
microphone envy, that's something you don't often hear about, but
I got the diary entries for the launch stage. You want to hear that? Do you want to hear that as well? So Monday, 17th of October. So we're 2 days early, but we shot to number 6 on the arts and lit chart on iTunes. Remember when we thought that was important? Rising to number 4 throughout the day. We have a dozen ratings, 11 5-stars, 1 4-star, and 1 short but positive review. And then on Tuesday, a couple of days later, 500 downloads on the podcast. Now, we're well over 500,000 now, aren't we, at least? So, really good first reviews and star ratings. Topped out at number 3 on the Art and Lit chart. Good stuff. We got off to a cracking start. Absolutely cracking start. So I'm really happy with that.
It was a bonkers first couple of months because we had, we also had some big names really early on as well. We were very fortunate. And of course, the thing that I find fascinating is we're coming up to the US election, and it's like we're in this 4-yearly cycle now because the US election happened around the time when we were interviewing Bryan Cranston, and that was one of the things that really sparked. You've got something in there as well, haven't you? This was one of our biggest moments. We're kind of jumping ahead to some of the questions down the road, but one of the biggest moments for us. Actually, let's save that. Let's save that one for later because
right.
Let's spread the diary entries out. So, Mr. Stay, I've got a question from you from Jack Harmon. Thank you, Jack, for sending this in. Have you sold the movie rights to Back to the Future? And who would be the cast as the lead role?
Back to reality, not Back to the Future. Nice try.
Really live.
I think they've been sold.
Back to reality's been done, isn't it? Yeah, just a couple of times.
Well, Back to reality. No, we haven't sold the movie rights, but I did knock together a rough first draft of the screenplay, just in case anyone comes knocking. It needs work. Who would you cast in the lead roles? Asked Jack. You know what? I would love. She's not old enough yet, so let's wait 10 years.
That's why we haven't sold the rights, right?
Exactly, because I'm waiting for Adele to hit 42. Because I think Adele, I reckon she's actually probably a really good actor, and she's got the voice. She's got that voice, So I think she'd be great as Jo.
And then if Adele did that role, she would Oh no, it wouldn't be her. It'd be the younger version of her that would sing an Adele song.
Yeah, but we could de-age her like they did in The Irishman. You know, we could just de-age her. That's easy peasy. You know. So yeah, Adele or Beyonce. You know, either would be just.
Well, Lady Gaga's done it. So here's a little secret. When we started writing Back to Reality, for all those of you who read it, and for all of those of you who are going to rush out and buy it off Amazon right now, we were thinking of which character. You know, we looked at lots of different characters, and our main character. There was some other kind of. There's the antagonist in there, and we looked at a lot of other artists out there, and we kind of created an avatar of all these different artists. And I said to Mark when we were writing the book, I really want Diamond, who's the antagonist, to be played by Lady Gaga. And I remember you laughing at me going, Lady Gaga, you got me joking. And that was before she started acting and before she won a frigging Oscar. And I thought, God, if we'd pushed the book to her at that stage before she got big and famous in the acting world. But I'm still holding a light out for Lady Gaga as Diamond. And definitely, bless his socks, Danny DeVito has to be Laurie. For anyone who's read the book, I would love Danny.
Ray Winston. I love Ray Winston.
Ray would be good as well. Yeah. Anyone who can do a good Cockney accent has got the role. Actually, if you've got any ideas, if you read the book and you're in the studio audience, who would you like to see cast in the main roles? Because we could actually reach out to them, and that might be a good way.
Mike says we all need de-aging. Yeah, excellent. I'm not going to do it by eating cake, but you know, there we go.
No, exactly. Watch us age over the next hour, folks. Brilliant. Next question.
Jeff White. Jeff White says, "What are you proudest of that has come out of the podcast?" Thank you, Jeff. Mr. D, what are you proudest of?
I'm actually, the thing I'm most proud of is the fact that we're still here. Because I'll tell you what, Mark and I have had our ups and downs. Let's be honest. We've had a lot of stress doing this podcast and a lot of brilliant fun. And I think for me, testimony that we're here doing this, to do it for 4 years. A lot of podcasts start and they finish after a month or two. People realize, you know, it's only really once you start doing them, you realize how much work they are and how much effort it is to keep them going. And so I'm proudest of the fact that we're still going. And I feel like we've got so much more to explore. One thing I've learned through this podcast is there's always something new to learn from each other and from everyone listening and from our amazing guests as well. But yeah, I'm proudest of the fact that we're still going and that people are still listening. In fact, that everyone's, you know, still listening and the podcast is becoming more and more popular every week just keeps us fired up and is just you know, fuel in our tank. How about you, Mr. State? What's your proudest moment?
It's all these guys. It's all these guys here. Anyone who's written a single word because of the podcast. I mean, that's a win. I mean, look at this. Look at this pile of books. Look. That's half a pile of books. I'm just going to put that there. There's another pile of books there. You know, Panilla, S.E. Moorhead, Ian Sainsbury, Lorna Cook, Steve Gowland, you know, G.M. White, Mark Hood. You know, we got Sage, we've got Robin, we've got Julian, Rosemary, Mike, Jack, Jenny, Neil Bainan, Paul. You know, so many of these people, Craig. So many of these people are here tonight. And I'm just, you know, and I'm calling some of these people friends now, you know, they've become our podcast family and I am proud to know them. And I'm just so honored to have been part of their writing journey, you know, and it's a real honor. It really is just a complete honor. And, you know, that's, it's the most unexpected thing because we talked about doing a book together. And, you know, would we make it? Would we do it in 12 months? And I said, you know, there's bound to be someone out there who's got a half-written book. You know, there's got to be one person. And there's, you know, at least 20 there. And there's more out there.
They're the ones we know about. Yeah. And the ones that have sent you books, we know that there are hundreds, possibly thousands of books that have been maybe rebooted, restarted, maybe pushed over the finish line.
Exactly. And we got award winners here. You know, Lorna's won awards. You know, Ian's won awards. There's people who've, you know, it's just incredible, absolutely incredible. So that is, you know, that's my proudest achievement by far.
Fantastic, absolutely brilliant. And actually, one of the best things about doing this podcast is getting the emails from all of you. We have had, honestly, it's a treasure trove now, and I keep every single one. I save it in a special folder on my computer. And it's these incredibly heartfelt emails where people tell us about their journey as an author, and they talk about, if and how the podcast has helped them. And I think those are those kind of special notes that you get, which you treasure forever, I think, because I think for a lot of us right now, I mean, when we're writing books, we're trying to help change people's lives and worlds. I mean, it's about how can your words affect someone in a deep and meaningful way, in whatever way that is, lifting them out of depression or inspiring them to become an author. There's so many different things that happen when you write a book. And so for us, the kind of version of that of the podcast is hearing about your stories and how you've overcome adversity. We've had so many incredible stories of people who have gone through so many incredibly difficult times, and yet writing has kept them going. That's been the constant in their life, or the thing that's always drawn them back to a kind of a centered kind of stability in their life. And getting those heartfelt emails are truly incredible. So I want to just say thank you, and I know Mark does as well, to every single one of you that's emailed us in the last 4 years. And, because I think those emails also are the things that keep this podcast going as well, hearing about those things. So I'm absolutely, a massive heartfelt thanks to everyone on that as well. I've got tons of things happening in the chat right now. Trey says, it may sound sloppy, but I actually talk back to you both when I listen to the podcast. That's lovely. I've also finished one of those. I'm also one of those with 2 kinds of finished books who, thanks to BXP, got back to writing after a break for a career change that took so much brain power. And Trey says, thanks for that. Thank you for sharing that, Trey. That's incredible to hear. And Chris says, your podcast got me interested in taking my dream of writing a novel seriously. I'm now in the BXP Academy and loving it. Thank you. Well, Chris, it's absolutely wonderful having you in the Academy and also having you here today. And thank you for sharing those words. And I want to say just a quick well done to James, because James Sharp said, I was doing my 200 words before joining this live stream, or my good 200. Man. That's good. And actually, on that note, I do need to thank you for reminding me, James, because we do need to encourage people to get over to the website to sign up for our 5-day challenge. If you're thinking of wanting to create a writing habit, an ongoing writing habit, and really get it established in your life, regardless of how busy your life is, we've set up the 200 word a day challenge, and you can try it for 5 days. Just go along and do 1,000 words in a week and see how it shifts and changes things. It's all about taking small measures, folks. If you want to try that, pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com/BXP 2020, and you can read all about it there.
Mike says, as I sit here trying to finish book 3, I blame you for everything. Now, Mike, that's book 3 of your mega Galant's book deal, isn't it? That was, so, we salute you, sir. I'm in awe of your achievement. So get on with it. But after
absolutely, back to work, podcast. Mike. Back to work. This is Mr. Mike, who, just so people realise the kind of royalty that we're with, Mike was nominated for the Carnegie Medal, which... It's pretty massive. So congratulations, Mike, for that as well. I mean, hugely inspiring. And as I've said to Mike, I demand now not a nomination next time, but the actual award. I want you to bring it to the Bestseller Academy and show us the pictures.
Actually, that might be Mike Shackle.
Oh,
because
okay.
we got Mike Ravel, who's published by like Quercus and, like you say, major Carnegie Award winner. And then we've got Mike Shackle from Golan. I mean, it's like, we got award winners here, award nominees there. I mean, this is 4 years. This is amazing.
Absolutely brilliant stuff. All right, next question, Mr. Stay. The question it's actually around similar kind of questions. Tom Foote, welcome, Tom. Tom's an Academy member. He said, what are your writing and podcasting goals for the next 4 years? That's a big question. Mr.
Well, writing goals. Well, I can have a cover reveal for my book soon, and finally I'll be able to talk about the bloody thing. But it's coming in February. It's the first of a 3-book deal. I'd like that 3-book deal to turn into another 3-book deal. So I'm working on this series, The Witches of Woodville. That's going to take up a lot of my time over the next few years. I'd really like to build that into something extraordinary. I'm working the film. It hopefully should be out next year. Already working on, sorry, the cake is giving me windy pops. I'm already working on ideas for a sequel. sorry, and sequels and other TV and film ideas as well. So, getting those in my bag. So I've got a very busy 4 years, but I do want to keep podcasting. I do want to keep going because I love talking to authors, because I swear, this is going to answer a question that comes later on, which was, how have you changed? This podcast has made me a better writer. No question whatsoever. Talking to authors every week for this podcast, I've just learned so much, and it's changed me. So one way or another, I'm gonna keep doing that. Right, back to my cake. What about you, Mr. D? What are your goals?
The next for me, one of the most exciting things right now is building the academy, because what I've seen in just the first month and a half that we've been doing the academy, everyone that's joined the Bestseller Academy are absolutely dedicated and serious about becoming best-selling authors, and there's this incredible spirit amongst them, and an incredible camaraderie as well, which I love to see. There's so much support going on, and it's something that I've always dreamed of creating, is this like kind of place where you show up to be the very best that you can be as a writer. And that's what we've got. We've got the most incredible group of people. So that's going to be taking up a lot of my time over the next number of years. In terms of writing, I am absolutely determined to get I've got a really interesting screenplay that I've written, the first ever screenplay I've done. I did it really.
I'm dying to read this. I want to read this.
I honestly, it's more of it is an experiment, as everything is, as we know on this podcast, but I'm kind of curious as to how it gets received. And I've got a dream about that. I'll share the dream declaration right now. I'd love to bash it into shape well enough so that I can pitch it and go through the whole process of pitching it for a potential Netflix series. So that's one of the things I'm really focusing on. I still have my children's book, which I was originally, I think I said about 2 years ago, I was going to try and learn how to illustrate in order to illustrate the characters, but realized that that's a lifetime journey, just learning how to become an incredible artist. And as a result of going through that process, I've gained such a huge respect for illustrators. So if anyone's out there that illustrates children's books, huge respect, because I've realized just how incredibly talented you have to be and how much dedication you have to put in. So I think I might be looking for an illustrator for that book, or pitching it to a major. Because I think I might have a little bit of a special children's book to get out there. And then I still got this big dream. I've got a number of books which I've kind of either part written or finished now, which are more along the personal development side of things, but I'm trying to bash those into more of a storytelling format. So it's non-fiction, but more in a storytelling format. And I really do want to draw a lot of what we've learned on the podcast and start to put out some books around things on personal development, maybe some workbook things which are kind of relevant. And I'm also getting fascinated by habits. This 200 words a day thing has really opened my eyes to how the small things in life can completely change everything that we're able to accomplish. So I'm kind of starting to go a little bit deep in that. So I might do some work around that. But yeah, as always, too many things going on in one go, and I have to learn how to focus. That's probably my biggest learning for the next 4 years, but I don't think I'm alone with that. Next question for you, Mark, from Mike Revel, who we talked about earlier. Mike wants to know, this is a brilliant question. What's the most useful tip or strategy you've learned from the podcast that you apply to your writing now?
Well, write every day, which I just want to qualify that, because, I was largely doing that anyway. And Sarah Pinborough's Think Every Day, I found really, really helpful. But let's just say the write every day thing, I don't write every day. I don't. I mean, I do, but I don't. But when I'm in the middle of a draft, I'm writing every day. At the moment, I've got to read my proof pages, which is the next thing I do, and I just can't write every day when I'm doing that. But I am thinking about, the book and what have you. I'm always doing something that's moving me forward. But it's like when you start a musical instrument, if you're learning to play the piano or the guitar, you have to practice every day. Otherwise, you won't get anywhere. But if you get to a point where you know where all the notes are, you don't necessarily have to practice every day, but, you keep your hand in, kind of thing. But, that's where the thinking every day, that's where someone like Sarah Pinborough, who clearly knows how to write a novel or two, doesn't feel she has to write every day, but she's always, it's always turning over. And like I said, just talking to authors every week for the podcast. That's been keeping my story mind turning over in incredible ways. The other great bit of advice was Joe Hill, who was basically saying, write what gives you joy. Write the stuff you want to see, the most exciting thing. And I've applied that to all my writing ever since. You kind of think, oh, there's an obligatory scene that needs to go here. I need to do this. I need to do that. Or is it going to be a bit of a trudge? Actually, no, sod that. I'm just going to write the thing I want to see next. And that has really, really helped. And both Erica James and Karen Matthews said the same thing as well, which is write from the heart, which sounds, a little bit Hallmark cardy initially. It might be a bit, but actually, if you don't write from the heart, it don't mean nothing. And that's probably the biggest change to my writing since starting the podcast. I try to give it some big emotional oomph. And I'm delighted to say the book I've got coming out in February has made people cry for the right reasons. So not because it's so, yeah. So it's not my agent going, oh my God. No, it's, it's that's
brilliant.
For me.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I think if you write if you write from something from the heart, then you write a book with a heart. Okay, and that's really, there's a lot of heartless books out there. There's a lot of books out there that don't shift you emotionally. And for me, I think one of the biggest learnings I can't even begin to list the things that I've learned through this podcast, through everyone out there in the writing world, and from the interviews, and from you as well, Mark. I mean, it's just, there are so many things, but I actually look at story differently now. I look at story as the very fabric of what our society is made of, as the very thing that we use to pass down from age to age everything we know and all the knowledge that we have, and just how important story is in any form of engaging people. And that's the first part. And for me, the second part is then mirroring that with emotion. I think that and this is, again, another thing that I've seen in this crossover between music and the writing world, is that in chatting with people like Ed Sheeran, and they talk about how they believe it's their songs that are connecting from one heart to another heart, from the writer's heart to the listener's heart. I've realized that exactly the same applies in the writing world. If you can connect to your reader's heart emotionally, that is the key. I think everything else you can slightly move out to the edges. If you've got that, if you're writing with heart and emotion, that's where you get a book that changes the world, that changes a reader's viewpoint on something that, and that's the thing we always have to remember. And I think the other thing with all of this is the regularity that we've been doing the podcast is a reminder to not just me and you, Mark, but everyone writing, is that we never stop learning, and we often relearn. We've got Sage on our live audience right now, and Sage is one of these people who, I remember she started tweeting about how she started re-listening to the entire podcast again. And we know that through building the academy, we've been going back and listening back to episodes and indexing them. You can never listen to and learn this stuff enough times, because we do forget things. We only retain a certain amount of information. And so this lifelong sense of going and becoming the best author that we can be is also about a dedication of a lifelong learning and re-listening and relearning. And I guess you'd call it reminding ourselves, because it's only what we remember in the moment when we write that affects our writing. We don't take every single piece of information we've ever learned and put it into that paragraph, right?
No, exactly. And especially when you get to my age, you need to reinforce this stuff again and again and again. Sage left a little note here. She says, my brother's a professional trumpeter, and he always says, if I don't practice for a day, I know it. If I don't practice for 2 days, my neighbors know it. If I don't practice for 3 days, the world knows it. So
I love it. Yeah. That's so true. And actually, also, just to kind of mention something that you said, Mark, earlier about not writing sometimes. I actually think, and taking the musical instrument analogy further, I used to live next door to a guy that practiced the piano for 8 hours a day. He got so good at it that he said to me, I need to practice at 8 hours a day in order just to maintain my skill level. So I'm going to challenge people out there and say, even if you're editing a book, even if you're not writing a book, still try and write 200 words a day, because there's something about just keeping sharpening the saw every day that just keeps things. It's like anything in life. Think about stretching. If you stretch every day, you don't feel the tightness in your hamstrings. And if you leave it for a week and you stretch again, it's like you can feel it. So it's like, try not to take the day off of writing, even if it's just writing anything for 200 200 words. It just keeps that saw sharpened.
Sage says she's done 3 full replays working on my 4th. Sage, that's against the Geneva Convention of Human Rights. Blimey.
That would be over 1,000 hours of the podcast if Sage has listened to it 3 to 4, coming up to a 4th time. That's amazing.
Well, we salute you, Sage.
We do. In fact, yeah, you can become our librarian, Sage. You'll probably know more about the last 4 years of episodes than we do. Great question. That was really great. Thank you very much, Mike, for that. Mark, do you want to fire the next question?
Yeah, well, again, 2 that are quite kind of similar. So Steve Gowland says, how have you changed as people as a result of the podcast? Has your view of things changed from a life point of view? And Angela says, what's the most surprising thing to come out of the podcast? And I think those changes can be surprising, can't they?
Yeah, I think so. I think actually the podcast has helped us from a storytelling perspective, not just in our own writing, but in doing the podcast. I mean, podcasting's a very unusual thing. You're kind of like, it's like a radio show, but it's not a radio show. You don't tend to script it too much. You don't have these kind of BBC producers that come in and get rid of all your ums and ers and cats scratching at the door, which is what's happening right now. My cat is trying to break into the studio. I'm hearing his scratching noises.
Let it in.
It's not Jack Nicholson. No, if I let the cat in, it does this thing. It hops, and it will be right in front of the camera. Although there seems to be a whole cat thing going on in the academy. When we do our coaching sessions, everyone shows up with a cat. It's quite incredible. Everyone wants to see the cat. Trey saying it's a bear. It could be a bear. As I mentioned 2 weeks ago, I had a bear run past my studio. But I think what's really important is that in terms of the fun that we have, I always look forward to a podcast recording. Now, there's a lot of things that we have to do in life, which you're like, I have to do the bookkeeping, or I have to do this, or I have to do that. Things that you just feel are a real drag, and we all have to do it, unfortunately. But the podcast is one of those things that I've never thought, I've got to do a podcast today. It's something I've always looked forward to doing, and I always feel better afterwards. It always lifts me for the week. And you know what? I'll say this out loud now, but one of the reasons why I've done this podcast from the beginning is I actually want to create a little treasure trove for my kids, because I don't know which one of them may end up wanting to write. They're all fascinated by writing. And having gone through all the stuff that I've gone through in life in the last few years, I realized the importance of creating things which are time capsuled and recorded. And for everyone listening, that includes your book. I've said this enough times, but I'll say it again. Everything you write down is going to live forever, right? And so for me, these podcasts, I marvel at the idea of maybe in 200 years, my great-grandkids going, this was my great-great-grandfather. And they may never have met me, but if you're there, kids, I'm going to say hello to you. My great-great-grandkids, hello, I'm here. I'm thinking of you, and I wish I could be with you. But I hope these are useful and maybe give you a little insight into what these crazy times are that we lived in. Because, we're documenting 2020 as we speak, right?
Paging my descendants from their pandemic bunker. Just eat my books or use them as fire. Use them to make a fire. Whatever gets you through the dystopian apocalypse.
How about you, Mark? What's changed you as a result of this podcast?
I was never much of a joiner. I had to think long and hard before doing the podcast, because I know what you're like. I knew that this would be an all or nothing kind of thing. And I thought, actually, this could be, because I hated the idea of, a writer's group. I would never go to a writer's group. I would never, just give my script to some Yahoo that I'd never met before kind of thing. And now, look at me, Podcast Academy, the BXP group. They're my family now, it's my writing family. Like I said earlier, my peers, the people I look up to and admire that I've come up with. And that's probably the biggest change. I've certainly opened my mind up that way. And I know that there are people out there, the people who are here today, these are our Best Foot Forward sort of vocal listeners. I know that there are going to be loads of people out there who listen to the show and never say a peep, because I know that, because I have several favourite podcasts and I never drop them a line. I never go to their live shows. But I love them. I listen to them every week. So if you're one of those people, you don't have to step forward, but we love you too. It's again, yeah, we know, because we see the weekly downloads, and it's not, the 24 or so people coming to the live shows or whatever, or it's much more than that. So hello to you all. And the surprising thing is just the success of everyone around us. I mentioned it earlier. I mean, we got an email from Zach Erlocker this week, who I know supports the show. He says, just want to let you know, my brother and I have submitted the latest draft of our historical noir mystery novel, The Man from Middlework, to our publisher. Took a couple more drafts than expected, but it's come out stronger as a result. I found the podcast to be a great resource to help me focus on the big picture, hear how other writers have tackled daunting writing or editing challenges as a never-ending supply of positive encouragement. I can't overstate how valuable that has been. Thank you for the podcast and the pearls of wisdom. So that we get emails like that and thank you, Zach, and your brother, and good luck to both of you with the book. And it's made me a better writer, and it's made me a better listener as well. So I think it's definite change for the better.
Yeah, podcasting definitely teaches you not to interrupt, doesn't it? As in, something that we do all the time in our normal day-to-day conversation. But I remember always learning when I did some media training years ago, and it wasn't for anything to do with podcasts, this idea of just letting people talk. And when I did a lot of radio on the BBC, I noticed that the presenters there was a very different way of talking. And so there's just a lot of incredible learning. I also want to say thank you to everyone who's ever recommended this podcast to anyone or told them about the podcast. Yes. Sage actually just posted on the chat, and she said, I'm always going on about the Bestseller Experiment on my podcast and my live streams. So I hope that some of my listeners and viewers are coming over this way. We have, really, we can only do what we do here, but it's all of the listeners, it's everyone out there who thinks of a writing friend, thinks of someone that might want to be inspired, thinks of someone who's maybe thinking of writing a book, and they put the podcast their way. And we've had lots of stories of people who, discovered us at many different points of the journey. And, so thank you to everyone because word of mouth, we've said this over and over again about books, haven't we? We know that word of mouth is the only ultimate way to really get a bestseller. I mean, you can throw money at something, but word of mouth is the thing that drives it, because it's proof, it's social proof that you have a great book. And, on the same kind of note, thank you to everyone who's recommended this podcast. And if you can't think of someone right now, that next time it does, please do, because it is the lifeblood of growing it and getting this out to more people. So fantastic.
So there's a question here. I love this question. I think this is from Angela as well. Is there anything you would do differently if you could go back and change something? Any thoughts on that?
I think I wouldn't have over-edited the first 20 episodes so much. I was so paranoid about ums and ahs and all of those natural inflections. Really, I spent hours and hours. And before we got Dave, our editor, who came on board to help us, because it was taking me hours and hours, I became a little bit too precious of trying to get like BBC level production. And I recognized that it's actually more about the spirit of what we're doing. And like, we do wing it most of the time. And it's great, because that's what life's about. Life's about winging it a lot of the time. We're kind of pantsers when it comes to podcasting, I think, in a way, aren't we, Mark? But so I think that's what I would have changed in terms of the podcast. I think the big thing I would have changed as well is I would have given us more time to market our book, because we ended up kind of writing the book right up to the end of that first year. It would have been kind of interesting to have written it in the first year and then marketed it in the second year, and really given us really documented the marketing process and in a huge way. I think I would have done that differently. But not much else, Mark. How about you?
Well, there's a version of the show where we'd have written a book each solo, and that would have been interesting.
Well, like a head-to-head.
Yeah.
How would we have done that? What would have called it? Back to Reality version?
I don't know.
Version 2.
You'd have written your Tom Clancy techno thriller, and I'd have written some, half-assed fantasy novel.
I sent Mark. No, we haven't talked about this. I remember when we were thinking about writing the book, I remember sending Mark a one-page synopsis, and it was about car automation car. Do you remember that? Car automation. And it was a thriller about a car that someone hacks into and takes over the world with. And you kindly said, nah, I think maybe you kind of like veered off into something else. So there's all kinds of other ideas that we came up with. I think we had kind of bits and pieces of different ideas. But that would have been interesting, actually. I don't think it would have been as much fun, though. Less arguments.
No.
Less arguments.
Yeah.
Well, less debates, I should say. They weren't really arguments. They were spirited debates, weren't they?
But the thing is, I think the book that we got out of it, I would never have written that on my own, you know, and it's a fantastic book. And that's a big surprise. That was a great gift out of that first year, because it's such a, you know, fun, uplifting book. And, you know, it's people have taken great joy from it. So I think what we did in the spirit of cooperation worked out really well in the end. But yeah, there's a sliding doors timeline where you're now Tom Clancy 2, and you've walked away from the podcast, and I'm still trying to get the End of Magic finished. So Ed was asking how me and Mr. D met and decided to do the podcast, and it came out of Robot Overlords. Actually, Mr. D got in touch. I think when I put the trailer up on Facebook, and he was like, "This is amazing, you know, living the dream kind of thing." And we just got chatting, and we discovered we both loved podcasting. And he said that, you know, he'd always wanted to write a book but never got beyond 20,000 words. And I knew Mark from when I was a teenager. We didn't go to the same school, but we had mutual friends, and we saw each other at gigs and parties and stuff like that. So it's that's, you know, we had this sort of ties going back and lots of mutual friends. So yeah, that's how we met up. And it's interesting, you know, it's just become so intertwined with each other's lives ever since. So yeah. So that's how we got started. Still waiting for Mr. D to come back. He's disappeared. Oh, power cut. Oh my gosh, Mr. D's had a power cut. He's just messaged me on WhatsApp, give me a min. Okay, I'll try and keep you going until the power comes back on. Oh my gosh, that's incredible. It's the bear. The bear has bitten through the wires and cut off Mr. D. Crikey. Okay, right. Well, look, let's just put things on hold.
So, Mr. Stay, we just had a power cut during the live recording of the podcast. First time in 4 years, but I'm back.
It's that bear, biting through the power cables.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. There's no apples left on the tree, so brilliant stuff. So, Mr. Stay, what was the next question that we had?
Ed Howard says he's always wondered how we met and decided to do the podcast. We sort of covered that a little bit, but I mean, we went to different schools. We knew each other as teenagers. We saw each other at parties, and we had lots of mutual friends. And sort of, you know, became Facebook friends and stuff. But I think it was after Robot Overlords, I put the trailer up or something. You got in touch via Facebook. We said we should do something. You'd always wanted to write a novel, but never got beyond 20,000 words. So, you know, it all kind of kicked off from there, didn't it?
It did, yeah. I know that we never really knew each other, did we? Because we had mutual friends. But I always remember people. Some of my friends that were at your school often would talk about you. And I remember our mutual friend, Jeremy, who's actually just been on the podcast, funny enough. Originally, it was going to be a podcast between me, you, and Jeremy, wasn't it? We were going to do a triumvirate type setup. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
But I think what's really fascinating is that Jeremy and a couple of other guys would always mention your name. So, oh, this Mr. Stain, you were doing all these crazy theatre productions at your school. And so I was always kind of curious to kind of get to know you a bit better. And it was really that initial way that we connected on Facebook. It was the Ghostbusters post. That was the second time. The first time we actually just had a Skype meeting, and we just had a chat about, you know, I wanted to learn a bit more about what you'd done. And then you posted a Ghostbusters post about 2 years later. That was the gap. About something about a movie, and they'd done this big thing up in Waterloo Station for the new Ghostbusters movie, and
the big Stay Puffed Marshmallow Man's head coming out of Waterloo.
Yeah,
so I think
bizarre.
that just reminded you that I existed, and then you got in touch again.
No, something about movies, and I thought, and I think at that time, I can't remember what happened. I mean, I'm sure everyone's got a story about how they started their book or how they thought about doing a podcast, but I think around that time, we were maybe both thinking about podcasts, we were both enjoying them.
Yeah.
And that came up as a common thing. So yeah, that's how it happened, which has been funny. So I haven't spent more time with anyone else, I think, Mr. Stay, than you. But following on the next question, when was the last time we met in person? It's kind of bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah.
We see each other for hours every week, and yet we've only actually met a couple of times in the last few years, face to face.
Yeah, I see. You think it was 2018, don't you?
I think it was 2018 when I was last in the UK. Yeah. We met in again, mutual friends. One of our mutual friends is a pub baron, Baron Stockhausen. he collects pubs for a hobby, and we went to one of his pubs in Ashtead. In fact, if people are ever going to write a bestseller experiment guide, leg and mutton in Ashtead. Leg and mutton in Ashtead. If you're ever passing through Ashtead, go and have a pint in leg and mutton. That's where Mark and I last met. And there's a photo, I think, somewhere on the site of us meeting in that pub. And I had a great tour around the publishing company Hachette in London. I'd never been inside a big publisher's before. And Mark was kind enough to take me inside and show me around. And you know what I remember seeing? I remember seeing a big bookcase in the open office, which were all these books, which were they review copies or books?
They're usually finished copies, actually. Certainly on the Orion floor, it's pretty much everything they published, that they've got in the archive. It's all archived on the office floor. So yeah, it's there's one of everything basically.
Brilliant. It was absolutely fantastic.
It's incredible. Yeah.
And all the authors' names written along the wall of every book that Hachette had
fantastic mosaic of every author that Hachette has ever published. And
Mr. Stay is on there.
I'm in the stairwell on the way down to the bogs. Claire is on there as well for her children's books. So yeah, it's lovely.
So you just never know what's going to happen. You get published. You might even get your name written on a wall.
Yeah, you end up as graffiti. Yeah.
Graffitied. That's brilliant. Living the dream, right? Living the dream.
Living the dream.
Stuff. Next question.
Neil Bainan says, what's the trend in successful writers you feel everyone misses? And Laura Shep says, have you seen any unifying traits in best-selling authors? Neuroticism, sense of humour, charisma, introvert tendencies. So have you seen any common threads in the authors we've spoken to?
Thank you, Neil and Laura, for this question. This is a great question. I think one of the most amazing things that I've really seen in almost every author that we've had on the show and every author that I've met is that we're all completely normal people, and we all have moments of darkness, moments of fear, and moments of questioning our abilities. I think one of the most amazing things is when you speak to a multi-million selling author and they say those words, I'm currently working on my next book and I think it's a pile of pants. It's like, for me, it just keeps reminding me that even though we look up to these people who have been, like our author icons, every single one of those people have exactly the same fears and doubts that everyone else does. And I think it's really worth remembering that we shouldn't put these people on a pedestal as if they're superhuman beings. They struggle with the same challenges. And that is really encouraging for me and for everyone out there, because we're all part of the same kind of, makeup, and celebrate those things, and absolutely don't let them stop you from writing, because I think the biggest difference is the people feel the fear and do it anyway, or they question the doubts and they write anyway, and they finish draft 1 and make draft 2 better. That's probably the thing. And they finish their books, because let's be honest, you can't be a best-selling author without a finished book. I think those are the things that really have made the group of people we've seen succeed as best-selling authors stand out.
Adam here says Adam makes my point exactly. He says a published author is just an amateur who didn't give up, and that's the thing I've noticed is tenacity. Tenacity is such a great trait. Is the wrong word. It's the thing every writer needs. Even the ones who got it relatively easy. You get authors, they wrote one book and they get a multi-million-dollar deal or whatever. They still have to work hard to stay in the game. If anything, it's probably harder for them. The rejection never stops. People poking their oar in never stops. And I've always admired those authors who are flexible enough to roll with the punches and retain their own voice, who for them the writing is everything. And I've spoken to so many writers who've said even if they didn't pay me, I'd still carry on writing, which you should never tell your agent or publishers. But, they do truly believe that. And I think that tenacity, because, we've seen people who get deals and then the books don't sell, or they lose their agent, or their agent moves on to something. I mean, it's interesting. I've got a diary entry here about the day that the Cranston thing went bonkers and we were going viral all over the world. That's the same day that my previous script agent dropped me.
Wow.
So that's blows hot and cold. Suddenly we're viral. We're on Fox News and everything all over the world.
Yeah.
And my agent says, "Sorry, I'm moving on and I'm not taking you with me." So it's it's just, as long as you come, the writing is my happy place. And I think that for any writer who is passionate about what they do, that will always be, it's not to say the writing is easy. It's difficult, it's complicated, it can be baffling, it can be infuriating. But if you love going back and putting those words down and solving those problems, then I think you're always going to be a writer. And yes, Robin, you do have to finish it. She's put finish. We have to finish. Yes, finish.
I got a really good tip for finishing. Make the first 2 words of your novel the end, and then just start from there. That's draft 1.
Yeah, work backwards.
Fake draft 1. The end.
Exactly.
All
Why
right.
not?
Actually, you know what? That isn't. I joke, but that isn't a bad. Bit of like visualization in my wonderful world of woo-woo, as people like to call it. But write the end. Start with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey once said. Write the words "the end" as your first book, and say, right, I've done draft 1. I'm going to start draft 2. Brilliant stuff. I think there's another thing that a thing that people talk about in terms of traits that everyone typically misses. Because Neil said, what the trends in successful writers that you feel everyone misses. I think for me, it's not just about the perseverance. It's about the habit building. Honestly, because you can have the best story idea in the world, but if you don't have a good habit to writing, again, it's almost like it's almost, the habits of writing is like the car, right? You get in, if you've got good habits, you get in the car and you get momentum and you drive forward and you go anywhere you want. But not having good habits is a bit like trying to write a book whilst walking on foot. It'll take forever. And you could end up getting lost and you get very tired very quickly and not going to make anywhere near the progress you could be making. So I want 2021 to be the year of people focusing on their writing habits, because I think without that, doesn't matter how good an author you are, you're missing the potential of maybe 10 times as many books that you could actually publish in your lifetime. And I've noticed in almost every single author we've interviewed, they're very, very habit driven. They have a very regimented way of writing. They plan, or they pants, but they still plan the pants, as it were. They have deadlines, they dedicate, they sit down, they have a schedule. They know when they're going to write, and they make it a priority in their life around, and know that everything else will move around it if they make it a priority. So I think that's a biggie. And the final thing I'll mention very quickly is I think every author we've interviewed, whether they tell it to us or not, have secretly or openly dreamed about becoming a bestseller. And I think that's part of it as well. I think you have to believe it before it can happen. And, 4 years of doing this podcast, I think has proven a lot of that is true, in terms of the successes we've actually seen. Absolutely.
Richie says,
Richie, yeah.
Yeah, it says, what's the hardest thing about balancing the podcast with writing and everything else you guys have been up to? I mean, your life is quite full up, isn't it, Mr. D? You've got...
It's bonkers. I think part of it... I'm going to say this again out loud, but the number of hours I have in the day now to do things have literally halved since my wife passed away. And so I'm trying to be that person. I'm trying to, actions speak louder than words. And that's why habits are such a big thing for me right now, because I have to be so focused on what I can achieve in a very short day now, and leave a bit of time just to kind of relax and do other things. So I think that the balancing, but it's not just me. It's a common story for everyone out there. It doesn't matter if you've got kids, no kids, you're in retirement, you've got a full-time job. We've got people in the academy that have got incredible amounts of work to do, and they're squeezing the academy in, which is amazing. And I think this is the biggest thing. It's about how do you balance it? For us, the podcast has definitely taken away a lot of writing we could have done, ironically. But I think the value that we've got from doing the podcast has helped the words we write today.
Absolutely. For me, it's the podcast is like, doing a course, going to school, I mean, since going full time, I'm still really at the point where I can only write for 2 hours a day, which is what I was doing when I had a full-time job, so I write first thing from about 7:30 to about 9:30, do a bit of housework, and then come back and then do something else, do a bit of housework, and those something else's are either academy things or podcast things or emails or talking to agents and whatever and all sorts, and hustling for work, so it's but you won't hear me complain, because I'm living my best life at the moment. I'm not going to complain. This is everything I've ever wanted. I wake up, I commute from the top of the stairs to here. I start writing, and sometimes people pay me for it. It's brilliant. It's just fantastic.
Yeah. And I want to remind everyone out there, remember that living the dream is not about the milestone when you hit it. It's not about getting that best-selling book. It's not about selling 1 million copies. It's not about getting the movie deal or your first autograph book or whatever, all of those things that people dream of doing. Living the dream is sitting down and writing every day, writing the first words of your novel. When you're actually doing it, you are living the dream. The realization of the dream is the moment when something big happens. But all of those words are living the dream to the point where you get these amazing milestones in your life. And once those milestones happen, those amazing moments, life carries on after those moments and you keep writing, right? You don't just stop writing when something major happens. You keep writing. So it's the currency and the lifeblood of what you do. So do remember that, because I think that's such a huge learning that I've had through this journey on the podcast. Rachel asks Mark, in doing the podcast, what's the greatest piece of advice you've ever been given or heard by an interviewee best-selling author?
I think it's just write the bloody thing. I mean, that's the general trend, isn't it? Just write the bloody thing, finish it, write it and finish it. It sounds, glib and simple, but it's the basic building blocks of your job. Write and finish it. And that's, like I say, it's tough. Finishing it is tough. But yeah, you got to get on with it. You can sit around and twiddle your thumbs all you like, but again, build that habit, right, as often as you can. Little bits, and you will get there. Rachel goes on, what bad habit trait do you find difficult to shift? You got any bad habits, Mr. D?
Oh, tons of bad habits. Absolutely loads. I mean, how long have we got? I've just started a list. Here's my bullet journal. If people aren't doing bullet journals, get your bullet journals, because I've written just the other day, this is actually something I've done, is I've written a list of 4 things. And actually you could follow along with me on this, because I think this is a really good way of doing it. Habits. Good habits I have, write a list of those. Habits I want to solidify. So things you're kind of doing habitually but aren't really properly happening. And then the other 2 questions are good habits I'd like to create. So those are the things that are missing in your life. And bad habits I want to replace. I keep hearing a lot in personal development world, they talk about to-do lists, and now people are talking about to-don't lists. I love that. The idea of like, what shouldn't you do? And so write down your bad habits, the things that you want to replace, and make those the good habits you want to start. So yeah, I've got tons in here, mate. I think the trouble with habits generally is that it's a bit like I was saying earlier about the learning side of things, is that even when you get a good habit going, keeping it going is just as challenging, if not harder, than starting it. Like we've seen people start the 200 word day challenge, go out the gates flying, and a month in, they're kind of like, oh, this is really hard. That's where the work begins. So 2021, year of writing habits. That's what it's got to be.
Matt,
what's your favourite word? Rachel asks.
Oh, okay.
Mark. What's your favourite word?
Bollocks. It's you can use it anywhere, and it's always effective. And Sarah Pimborough used it wonderfully on the podcast in her episode. But yeah, I use it all the time. That's bollocks.
I've got a quick story about that. When I went to Canada for the first time when I was 19, I remember playing pool with some Canadian students, and they asked me to say the word bollocks because they loved it. They thought it was such a great word. And they actually asked me what it meant. And I had to actually stop for the first time in my life and describe in detail what the word bollocks means, which isn't very pleasant when you think about it. Look it up online if you want to Google it. I'm not going to do it on the podcast. However, then one of my friends did an amazing shot. He potted the black, and I went, "Oh, that shot was the dog's bollocks." And he went, "What's the dog's bollocks?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, the dog's bollocks is kind of like the opposite of bollocks."
Yeah, it's the best,
right? And he's like, "That what?" And and because I had to describe what bollocks meant, his mind then went to thinking about what dog's bollocks are, and couldn't understand the English language from that moment on. So there you go. Don't ever try and describe that. It's obviously very confusing. Matt's got a great question. What are some of your favourite quotes from guests? Maybe not even the educational ones, but ones you keep coming back to.
The one that resonates with me, and we're talking about habits and getting things done, is Dion Mayer, who said, talked about eating the elephant one bite at a time. And I think that is a great attitude to life. I think that's a great attitude to getting things done and getting work done and not being overwhelmed by everything. So yeah, take life one bite at a time and enjoy every one. What about you?
One of the funniest ones, I always laugh at this, is Joe Hill's talking about putting a packet of cocaine in every copy of our book to help it sell. I don't know how we got onto that conversation, but that just just so surreal. I loved it. Yeah. That was fun. I think one of the biggies for me was Joanne Harris when she said, "Just write. You're an author, just write." They talk about the aspiring author, and she said, "No, you're an author. You're not an aspiring author. Just write."
She said it's bollocks. She said it was. Did she say it was bollocks? I'm sure she did.
Yeah, she may well have done. Yeah, she said it was BS. That's right. I think as well, Shannon Mayer is a huge inspiration, but her interviews early on were a massive inspiration to us. Yes. Talking about the muse is not something that you show up and wait for. You summon it and say, right, let's get to work. That was a big moment for me. And Bryan Cranston's quote about no matter how challenging your life might be or the things that happen, there's always a great story that will come out of every challenge. I think that was a really great life lesson from him. And again, it's like trying to choose between your kids. There was every author that we've interviewed has given us at least one or two golden nuggets.
Absolutely.
So that's really good. What else have we got?
Matt goes on. What writer who hasn't been on the show would you love to interview, and why? Even deceased writers would be interesting. Have you got anyone you'd have?
Loads. I'd love to get Simon Pegg on the show. I don't know why. I just would love to get Simon Pegg.
He's a great writer.
Great writer. I would love to. Obviously, it would just be kind of like amazing if Stephen King would join us one day, just because it would be amazing. It would be kind of fun. We'd never give up on that dream. And I think pretty much every author I've ever read, I would love to interview. I think there's just something about being able to get inside that person's head and ask them some of those questions that you might never get answers to otherwise. How about you, Mark?
Terry Pratchett would have been good, although he was very no nonsense when it came to writing. He had a journalistic background, and I think he would have been just bloody right. I always regret not getting Carlos Ruiz Zafón on the show, because I'd met him a few times, published him at Orion. What people don't know about Carlos is he's was sadly no longer with us, massive super geek. And he was just amazing. And I still like to get Neil Gaiman on. I've tried, pitches and what have you, but not heard anything yet. I did try John Cleese recently as well, but haven't heard anything back. Denise says, "Have you asked Stephen King or his publicist?" Yes, I have. Trust me. Well, I can tell you that when his UK publisher can't always get hold of him, it's let alone us trying to get hold of him. But yes, we won't give up on that. No, Stephen Fry would be great. I've met Stephen Fry about 3 or 4 times, but it was like 20 years ago, and he was lovely. He was absolutely lovely. Won't give up on that. He'd be good.
But he's a big podcaster as well, isn't he? Tell you what, Mark, I've been thinking for quite a few years now, and I can say that as we're 4 years old. I've been thinking for quite a few years that we should actually start up a vote for who you want us to try and get on the show, and let the audience just like pile in and see who the most popular one is. And we're getting a lot of Kate Atkinson a couple of those requests.
She's a great
So
writer.
everyone's going, yes, yes, yes. All right. So I'll promise that over the next 12 months, maybe sooner, we'll get something set up on the podcast so that you can actually come to the website and see who's already been voted for, add your votes to that, and add the authors. The only rule is that you can't put yourself, Mr. Stay. We've never actually interviewed you on the show. That'd be quite funny. But no, I think the rule should be is you can't put yourself in as an author, because we know a lot of people's dream is to come on the podcast, which I love, and I love that you hold that and are working towards that, and we'd love to have you on. Anyone else? Fun stories
when the
about...
film comes out, you need to get John Wright on the podcast, and he can tell you what it's like working with me. It'll be such a weird experience, but yeah, we should definitely do that one day.
That'd be good. Any fun stories about what it took to get a writer to do an interview? Asked Matt.
Well, it's the ones who turn up are usually fine. We usually ask, they say yes, or the publicist drops us a line, and we say yes or no. It's the ones who say no who are the funny ones. Do you remember we nearly got Alistair Campbell on, and he'd written a novel, and they came to us and said, "Oh, do you want?" And I said, oh, "Okay, well, yeah, let's." And I went to you and said, "What do you think, Alistair?" Because he's quite. He divides people, doesn't he? He's a politician in the UK, for people who don't know. I've got a lot of time for him, but a lot of people don't like him. But then he got really, it was like, well, what are their download figures? And then we never heard anything else. And I also had that with...
Yeah, but also publicists can be a bit...
Yes, protective. Yeah. Yeah. I had the same thing with Polly Sampson as well. Who, great novelist, but she's also written lyrics for Pink Floyd. And I think the publicist sensed that I would have spent the entire hour asking questions about writing lyrics for Pink Floyd.
Do you know what? Andy and Rachel have put a great comment idea in the chat there, and they've said maybe we should all take to Twitter and bombard Mr. King with requests to come on the show. Maybe we could do there could be like Zoom bombing. It could be like author. Oh no, it's not a good word. But like, what would it be called if we were like all to tweet someone at the same time? A Twitter storm, don't they call it? A thunder whack or something like that.
I couldn't possibly condone such behaviour.
Yes,
but if anyone wanted to do that, then by all means do it.
Love bomb, I like that. A word bomb. Word bomb. I think that'd be good. I think maybe we'll do that. We'll create the list. We'll see who we want to get for 2021, and then we'll ask everyone to. It's a bit like that person that kept on. What was that story about in the band Wheatus? Some fan asked if they would cover Toto's Africa. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, and it's a great cover.
They did, and they tweeted him over and over again, and everyone else started to join in. And then the band, Wheatus, actually released... Weezer. Was it Weezer?
Weezer.
Weezer. They released the song, a cover, but it wasn't... Originally, it wasn't the cover of Africa. It was another Toto song. So they had loads of fun. It's like, yeah, we've done the cover. It's not the one you asked for. So maybe we could do that. Maybe we should ask people to do that. I love this question from Ian Sainsbury's. Ian, award-winning author, bestseller experiment fan. After me, who is your favourite guest?
Who came after Ian? It was Garth Nix. There you go. Garth Nix was our favourite.
Brilliant. And then Queeve says, apart from Ian, did any other guests do the entire interview with their flies open and a large chunk of spinach in their teeth for the whole thing?
Yeah, that was Garth Nix again.
Again, wasn't it?
Denise Ganley says, what podcast do you each most want to be a guest on? Mr. D, I've got a little list. What are yours?
Oh my goodness, that's a big question. I've always had a dream, and this is ridiculous, you're probably going to laugh. I've always had a dream of going on Oprah, just for a laugh, just to see what's possible, because I've got a few things I want to chat with her about. That would be cool. There's a lot of there's a lot of big kind of personal development podcasts out there. I'm sure everyone's very aware of them. I'd been thinking for a long time of starting my own, but I think going on some of those would be quite fun to really try and open up, because I'm quite different. I don't know if anyone's ever heard me being interviewed on other podcasts that aren't book related, but if you imagine what I'm like when I get excited about personal development and life and stuff, imagine that times 100, because that's what I tend. I tone it down a bit for these ones, but yeah, that would be fun. How about you, Mark? What would you like to be on?
I'd love to go on Script Notes. Someone mentioned Script Notes earlier, but that's John August and Craig Mazin, the screenwriting podcast. I love that. That's my favourite. The Empire podcast, and I have met Chris Hewitt, who does that, and I've hassled him about it. When we did Robot Overlords, we almost got on there, but then we got bumped. So I'm hoping with the little people I might get on there again. And there's a podcast by Mark Ellen and David Hepworth called Word in Your Ear, which is sort of spin-off from Word magazine, which I loved and was cancelled, but they kept it going with the podcast. And that's great because it's just talking about old records and stuff. And they have a question, they asked people the same question, which was what music was playing in your home when you grew up? I'll ask you that, Mr. D. What music was playing in your home when you grew up?
Oh, ABBA, Blondie and Beethoven. Pretty much. Yeah.
Fantastic.
It was quite an eclectic mix, which probably explains my very broad and strange and interesting musical tastes. But yeah, how about you? Was it Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin, or was it?
No, my dad was a big Moody Blues fan. So we got into, I was brainwashed with Moody Blues before then. Funnily enough, he went through a Beethoven phase, a classical phase, which I think most men do in their sort of mid-40s. They have a sort of midlife crisis and realise they need to listen to classical music. Mum was great because Mum loved, she loved the Beatles, but she loved anything with a tragedy, a story like Leader of the Pack, stuff like that, where someone died at the end, Tell Laura I Love Her. All of those songs with terrible ballads, which I love. I love a good ballad. I love a song that tells a story. So that's
brilliant
mine.
Stuff.
So,
well, folks, thank you so much for all of your incredible questions. Thank you for everyone who's joined us on the live show today. We salute you all for sticking with us through the power cuts and everything else. And thank you as well to all of the beautiful comments that we had from everyone on the show as well. We haven't read out. There's a lot of really kind things that people have sent, some birthday wishes. So really, my request to you is email us and tell us or send us a note through the website, bestsellerexperiment.com. Have a look at the contact form there. Send us a message. What's the one thing that this podcast has most done for you? If you tell us that as a little birthday wish, we'd love to hear from you about that. And we'll be mentioning and dropping those into future episodes as well. And to Mr. Stay and to the beheaded Colin the Caterpillar Cake, thank you so much for the last 4 years as well. This has been an incredible journey. Yum. So much fun. And I look forward to seeing where it goes because in some ways, I think we're just getting started, which is a scary thing to say.
4 more years.
Exactly. Brilliant stuff, folks. Well, thank you again for joining us. Mark, if you want to give everyone the rundown of social media.
Yeah, come and find us on social media. We're on Twitter less these days, but we are there. We check it daily, which is at BestsellerXP. Instagram is lots of fun, also at BestsellerXP, and on Facebook we are the Bestseller Experiment. And of course, if you want to drop us a line, use any of those, but also go to our website, bestsellerexperiment.com. You'll find the contact tab there and drop us a line. We read them all.
Brilliant stuff. So it's a goodbye from Mark 1.
And a goodbye from Mark 2. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Bye, folks. Take care.
To read Back to Reality, the best-selling novel of the Bestseller Experiment by the 2 Marks, go to bestsellerexperiment.com/Back to Reality.
And subscribe to this podcast to get loads of extra bonuses. Go to bestsellerexperiment.com/subscribe.
Yes, supporting artists. That's correct. Yes, they are background artists or supporting artists. Oh, I just saw him flash up. When things in life are bad, they can really make you mad. Other things can make you swear and curse. When you're chewing on life's gristle, don't grumble, give a whistle, and this'll help things turn out for the best.